The fall equinox transitioning out of summer into fall, we start to bring all that energy inwards, right? So instead of being out here exteriorly in the world, we start to kind of come back into here and start getting more contemplative and more meditative, start looking at the decisions we have made, taking stock of what we've created for ourselves and wondering what might we do differently next year. Here we are, fall equinox 2022. What is equinox? What's really going on? Well, we're going to talk about that in a couple of different domains. We're going to talk about it just on the astronomical level, like what's happening out there in space that makes this day significant. And we're also going to talk about it just practically. Why is it a important day to observe here on this planet? And what does that mean for us in our day-to-day lives? We're also going to look at how does fall land on the medicine wheel, and what's happening as we transition from summer to fall, going through that west gate of the fall, definitely with the equinox being the center point there, and talk about the different ways we can look at that and work with our lives and find our way to transition ourselves along with nature and the planet and everything else going on in a harmonic way. And then finally, we're going to talk about the big picture. A little more on the philosophical side of like, how does this reflect and represent, or how could it symbolize what's happening in the bigger magnitude of just, us as a species on the planet. We're a being. We're this living organism walking around the face of a planet. Like, as far as we know, it's the only one that's happening on. Love to say that because it's so true. It's amazing. But first, let's just talk about what's happening out there in outer space, right? So, as you probably know, to some degree or another, that the Earth is tilted on an axis, somewhere around 23.5 degrees average. It wobbles a little bit on that axis, but basically you usually think about the planets, when you look at a globe or something, or a map of the world, it's just kind of like on this horizontal level, right? And there's the northern hemisphere and the bottom hemisphere, and North America, South America, Europe, Africa, right? But actually in space, when you wrap that map on a globe, it's tilted a little bit, right? It tilts back. And what that means is, as it goes around the sun, it's on this permanent tilt, right? So for us in the northern hemisphere, in the winter months, the northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun, if the camera was the sun, right? But as we come around again into the summer months for us, what happens, you can see that the northern hemisphere is then tilted towards the sun, if the sun was actually here in the middle, right? So that means in these positions here, where the Earth is on a tilt parallel to the sun, the equator actually is lined up with the curve of the sun, right? So there is this moment of one day, twice a year, there's one day where the sun rises and sets to our perceivable eye right along the east-west axis of the actual equator, right? So that's what's happening. What that basically means is we have, within minutes, equal day and equal night. So 12 hours a day and 12 hours a night, right? So that's what was happening. And, a couple of things come up for me thinking about that is, how, when, right? I know somewhere around when the agricultural revolution started to take hold, we had to kind of figure that stuff out because it helped us learn when to plant and when to harvest. But surely we were looking at the stars before then and just noticing how the sun would get higher in the sky in the summertime and stay out longer, and it would get lower in the sky. And I just kind of find that fascinating, just with the human, just as humans, how our perception, our observations, how we started to just notice that stuff, and what stories were we telling ourselves about what it meant, right? So a lot of the stories we have now are written down, but they are written down from oral tradition, right? So there's a time when stories were around enough to where when people knew how to write languages, we could record them. But there's a whole time of humans where those stories didn't make it to the time where we had writing, right? So especially in those earlier days when we were noticing what this stuff was happening in the skies, and we didn't really know what to do about it or what it meant, we would have to make up some kind of story or meaning, because humans are this very creative meaning-making machines, right? So one about those old stories that never got recorded. And so that's what's happening out there. And yeah, it's, again, it only happens twice a year. The other two times that are significant, of course, are the solstices, right? When the sun is, when the earth is tipped fully towards, one hemisphere or the other, right? And so June 21st and December 21st being the winter and summer solstices, longest days and shortest nights, right? But on the equinoxes, spring and fall, that's what's happening. We're completely parallel. The equator is parallel to the curve of the earth, and the curve of the sun are right across from each other. So we get that equal day and equal night. So practically, what does that mean, right? Well, as I mentioned, once we did kind of come into the agricultural, we kind of settled down and learned we could grow food and not have to migrate all over looking for it, became pretty important to know when we could expect the weather to change. So when we did our planting, it wasn't too early, right? So if you plant too early, it's possible that there could still be a frost, right? And would kill all your little sprigs, and then you would have nothing growing. It'd be too late to plant again because you wouldn't have enough time for it to grow after that point to harvest. It'd get too cold, right? There's a very narrow window, really, when you think about it. It's about 3 to 4 months. So only like a 20 to 25% of the year are you really able to grow food if you're living in, sort of the mid or lower ranges of the hemisphere. Now, obviously, if you're on the equator and the subequatorial zones, the tropical zones, there's food growing all the time, all year, because their seasons don't really change, a little bit, right? But in general, they have a pretty consistent amount of sun, and their moisture patterns are the same, and it's warm. Food likes to grow where it's warm. But as you get further away from the equator, those growing times and growing zones get more particular and shorter, right? So especially you think about North America and Europe, where most of the history, a lot of the agricultural history was happening there, into the Middle East and just, the Northern Hemisphere in general, as far as, what I know. I'm sure there was stuff happening in the Southern Hemisphere too. Most of the stories I know about utilizing why it was important to track the stars, and astronomy, and thus astrology, and all the different sciences and philosophies that came out of watching the stars was important, is because our food depended on it. Our way of living depended on it, right? Sure, technically, if we messed up really bad, we might have to regress back to Stone Age techniques of hunters, gatherers, migrating around. But for all intents and purposes, we've sustained this agricultural way of being for thousands of years now. But they say about 15,000 years is when we started planting and growing. So around the world, it's still a significant event. This day is still very significant because it basically indicates that it's time to get your food out of the ground. Cold weather's coming. If your food stays in the ground too long unharvested and a frost comes, you're going to lose your food that way too. So it's a pretty significant day in terms of how we sustain ourselves on this planet as a species, as a whole species. Our whole species depends on paying attention to these days. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, the days are getting shorter in our hemisphere. There's less light, right? You've been noticing the sun's going down a little earlier. It's not so bright when you get up in the morning. Maybe your days are getting a little cooler wherever you are. And this can definitely just affect our ability to get things done. I mean, depending on what you do for a living. I mean, if you're going into an office building and you're under lights all day in a cubicle, maybe you don't really notice. But if you have any kind of construction job or agricultural job, or a job that requires you to be outdoors to do your work, your whole work schedule is going to be adjusting right now to accommodate the shorter daylight and the cooler temperatures, right? So it affects if you look around, obviously our entire modern world is based on the infrastructure we have built outside. So all the buildings, roads, utilities, all that outdoor work. You think about anytime you're driving around town, you see road repair happening, or guys up doing wire work, or construction projects happening. There's a lot going on. And the daytime schedule, the changing of the light and the cooler temperatures, getting into snow and ice, can really affect how our society progresses on that level. Don't really notice it so much because, we usually, for me, I'm just griping when, there's road work going on, but it's a significant impact to the schedule of how we get things done. Personally, you might be experiencing a little lull in your own energy, just with the cooler days and the less light getting up and, less light to be out in the evening with. I know for myself that I get a little wistful when the light gets low, just like the sun just now dropped below the trees here. And I can feel the coolness of the air. And it just makes me I have a little bit of a wistful feeling, like, those long, bright, warm, sunny days, they're done. They're done for now. They're not coming back for quite a while. And I kind of like that feeling. I like that nostalgic sort of sentimentalness that I feel when fall starts to come on, and start to recall the summer. We're so present and so busy. We tend to be, anyways, in our lives in summer, just out doing, being, and not thinking so much about the past or the future. More just present and let's make the most of this time now. We don't really think about what happens after summer, right? Coming into this time. And so, yeah. And I kind of, like I said, I like that feeling. If you do have a garden, or any kind of outdoor, anything going on, if you have a pool, obviously there's work to be done. You have to prepare your grounds, you have to get things out of the garden. You gotta, if you want to preserve them and keep them to eat over the winter, you gotta freeze things, you gotta can things, you gotta process things. There's lots of extra work to do. There's tools to take care of. There's things to take from outside and put them inside so they don't get exposed to the weather change, right? So we don't really think so much about how much the weather impacts our schedule and the way we perceive the things we have and what we do with them, until we really stop and look at how much the seasons and the weather actually inform how we kind of do our life, right? Particularly if you're somewhere up in the upper or lower hemisphere. Yeah, I'm just thinking about this other aspect of, I did a summer solstice podcast over the summer, and what I wanted to tie into that now is, in that podcast we were talking about summer is the time to really what's the word? Cultivate, take care of what you got going, right? And I talked a little bit about how in the spring, it's all about the potential, and tons of seeds are falling, tons of sprouts are coming up. But it's kind of when summer hits, that's the moment where hopefully certain roots got in, or hopefully certain babies made it out of the egg or made it out of the nest, because once the time to grow comes in through summer, that cuts the potentials down. Now we're just working with, this is what we got to work with, and this is what we're going to take care of through the summer and shepherd into the fall. And now we're here, right? Now is the time where we get to reap the rewards of what we were able to take care of, and to look at that, and to realize that we can't really wait around and hope that we get a little more out of the things that we cultivated over the summer. Because again, if we wait too late, we're going to lose some of that, right? So psychologically, there is this shift of just acknowledging that the time of trying to make things happen is done. That's completing. And now we need to shift and make peace with that, saying, well, we had hoped to get what we could. We're going to get what we got. And we want to just focus in on that completion, the completion of this whole, 6 months of the year of trying to get to this point to make what we could make, so that we had something to go through the winter with. And that's not just for, gardens and growing your own food. That concept really does kind of follow through all of our different domains throughout the whole year, in different aspects of life. You think about the school season, right? And you think about certain markets, the commodities markets, right? The commodities markets are basically moving with the seasons. And there's other markets like that. There are certain Certain countries have certain economies that are based on seasonal output and seasonal resources, right? So there's a lot moving around these seasonal changes, and we really kind of think about when we just kind of read the paper and get the data, right? But this world is spinning, this world is turning, and the only way we're able to be here on it is to get into that harmonic, that track with it, to move with it, to be in synergy and sync in all the ways that we can. So even if your life isn't directly tied to something with the change of the season, we're going to talk next about why that might be good to start just tuning into, because every creature on this planet is tuned into that cycle and that harmony and that just going around the wheel of the seasons. So that's going to take us into talking about the medicine wheel, right? And I've talked about the medicine wheel before. And but specifically, if we look at the medicine wheel, and the wheel that we look at is one that is based on the Lakota Native American tribe wheel. It is not the Lakota wheel. But again, because medicine wheels with First Peoples, anywhere in the world you find them, are tied to the land. It feels good to look at the work that those first people did to identify and create that technology, so that we too here in this day and age can look at it and reflect on it and bring our lives into tune with it too. So in general, the West is called the autumn gate or the autumn shield, or the direction, and the color on the wheel that I refer to is black. So the seasons fall. There's a stage of life that's associated with each direction too. And for fall, it's adolescence. And adolescence is the time where we are beginning to come into that first major change of how we look at life. You think about getting out of high school or getting out of college or getting your first career, getting married. Somewhere in there's like a significant change where you realize you're not a kid anymore, and now you're an adult, and you've got to get out there and be responsible and take charge of your life and make things happen on your own, right? So that's a huge energy there in the West Gate in the fall, And similarly, like we were talking about just with food and stuff, it's like coming out of summer, there is that sense of, oh, there's still food on the vine to pick. There's still plenty of abundance, it's all good. But then you kind of pick it and realize this is what we got to work with for the next 6 months through winter. And there's that sobering sense of like, whew, okay, well, I got to be responsible. I got to take care of this food. I've got to take care of my resources. I got to be, learn how to, use them wisely. Right? And how am I going to take care of myself and offer service and care to other people with what I have, this limited amount, right? So there's that sense of recognizing that as much as there's a lot of abundance conversations out there about abundance, the real truth is things are limited. We have limited supply to fuel our abundance. Right. So recognizing that there is a ebb and a flow, and there is a way to be in that ebb and flow in a healthy way so that we feel the abundance, whether it's actual, abundance or not. And that's a little bit of a trick there. It's a little bit of a philosophical kind of emotional trick. But I think that's a big teacher from the West direction on the wheel is, looking back at our childhood and recognizing how we did literally kind of feel like there was no, like, abundance was a real thing. Like whenever we needed food, it showed up. Whenever we needed money, it showed up. Whenever we wanted to go somewhere, like we got there. Clothes, school, our clothes got washed and ended up back in our dressers. It's just like we didn't have to worry about anything. There was no concern about being taken care of. There was nothing but abundance. But then entering into the adult world and realizing that that's not exactly true, right? And certain sacrifices and decisions have to be made in order to create the field of abundance existing, even though resources are limited and come and go. So that's a pretty important one to dwell on. Speaking of dwelling, the West direction is also a time of introspection. It's about going inside, right? So if you think about in the springtime, school is getting out, you want to be outside, you're connecting, you're being with people, lots of social activity going, you're outside a lot for like in the actual outdoors. To kind of use the planting metaphor again, the community goes out and plants the seeds together for each other. They're getting all the seeds into the fields. It's big community work days. There's just a lot of outward, energy going out in the springtime into the summer. And then when we come to the fall equinox, transitioning out of summer into fall, we start to bring all that energy inwards, right? So instead of being out here exteriorly in the world, we start to kind of come back into here and start getting more contemplative and more meditative, start looking at the decisions we have made, taking stock of what we've created for ourselves and wondering what might we do differently next year, or what did we do well this year that's something important to double down on, good behaviors, good habits, good commitments, and also looking for the things that aren't working. All of us have things in our lives that have been there for a couple cycles, years, whatever, and there's a little bit of that youth mentality with believing, fairy tale thinking that, oh, this year it's going to be different. This year it's going to be different. There's a certain attachment to an outcome that isn't manifesting. And coming around to this time of year and doing that introspection work and really going into looking at, the bare root of yourself and seeing, is it time to pull those roots out, right? And how important it is to have people around you to help you do that reflection. So going inwards, doing self-inventory, coming out to small groups of friends, trustworthy people, and having conversations about, like, I'm noticing about myself, I really want to make this change, right? A few months from now, we're going to have a new year. Celestially speaking, the new year is actually on the winter equinox, right? That's when things start to change again. So between now and then is the opportunity to do, what the West Gate is really great at supporting, which is transformation, ritual death, ritual rebirth, right? Identifying things that no longer serve us, and creating opportunities, exercises, activities for ourselves to ceremonially die them off between now and the end of the year, right? So there's time to kind of plan how that looks and to make those decisions. And then to, so again, if the community is, going out together to plant the seeds together for the community garden, then in the fall, what we're doing is we're going inside on our own, and we're asking community to help us pull out our deepest roots within ourselves that don't serve. And what that does is create an open field, and then something new can be planted in there. So that's a pretty powerful metaphor to think about this time of year. And it's way easier to do that work at this time of year when there's so much visual feedback with things dying back, right? So obviously leaves are just starting to turn a little bit depending on where you are. There might be migrations of birds taking off. Depending on what kind of animal life you have around, you might notice that they're getting a little less, frequent. They're starting to look for places where they're going to hunker down for the year. So there's just a general pulling back, a general pruning back of all life right now. And it's a great mirror for us to do that within ourselves. The opportunity here is to create a clean slate for ourselves every year. Whether you celebrate New Year's on January 1st or December 21st, 22nd, using this time of harvest to gather the bounty of what we did well for ourselves over the course of the year, and then to let the rest go to seed or to root it out or to let it die off, right? And then our emotional, psychological, philosophical topsoil gets to rest and recover through the winter, and then in the spring it's renewed, and we can plant in wonderful new things and start to cultivate them for another cycle. Big pictures, bigger picture. So this is where I get a little philosophical. I've been doing a little contemplating and meditating on these things. I do all the time, but this one in particular really struck me the other day. So I have, I don't really have a news feed. I have my Apple News on my phone, right? And since I've had that, I've never gone in there and edited the preferences, right? I just kind of get what Apple throws up at me. And I know to some degree they're tracking what I spend more time on and what I don't, and they'll kind of, do their little logarithm deal. But in general, I don't go looking for climate change news. But I got to tell you, I'm sure all of us can relate that there's been so much climate change news and events this year, just with the flooding. I haven't heard of too many outrageous fires, at least, not in the States, but tons of flooding, heat waves, a lot going on out there, droughts. There's some huge, massive events going on. And the one thing that I feel is important to kind of put into the consciousness out there to consider is, if you look at how long humans have been around, right? So we're Homo sapiens, right? Homo sapiens have been around for about, they say, anywhere from 250 to 300,000 years as us, right? And then our most recent next ancestor was, I think it's either Homo, bodoensis or Homo robodelensis. I can't see these words, but a very close near ancestor who looked a lot like us, had a lot of the same, almost indistinguishable in some ways. But, the species or the family of hominids, right? Us and anything that looked similar like us is well over 1 million years old, according to science, if you're into science, right? So I think about that like, wow, we have been walking around on this earth in some form for 1 million years. That's incredible. And I know that there's some species, say like the loggerhead sea turtle, who literally pretty much in the same form it is right now swimming out there in the oceans has been the same turtle for 30 to 40 million years. Now that's a long living species. That's incredible, right? So 1 million years, nothing. And who knows if we're going to go 30, 40 million years. But what I wonder is, if we're looking at the medicine wheel and we're thinking about the cycle of life starting in the east in spring, going to summer in the south, fall in the west, north in the winter, where are we at on the wheel as a species? Because I feel like with all that's going down, I feel like as a species, as a planet, as a planetary event, we're kind of in a fall season altogether, and there's a lot that's dying, like things are getting burned off, things are drying up. There's lots of wild weather just breaking things down, destroying things. There seems to be a lot of the, we spent this great time of the last, I don't know, I guess you could even go back to the Egyptians, right? When they started building the pyramids and huge structures like that. Or even some of the South American, peoples had some pretty amazing structures too, but somewhere in there 4,000 or 5,000 years ago is really when I would say is like the summer of our humanity, where we were just building, creating, we had all these little things we figured out to do in the spring, building our technologies in the spring, all this potential, right? And then our summer was the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, building all this incredible stuff. To the point now where we have satellites. We've made, we've picked up handfuls of dirt, and we've made things that have flown outside of our solar system, like incredible potential. We've built amazing things. It's been a wonderful summer of making in the South, and now it feels like we're coming into this time of all right, time to pick and choose a few of the things that we really, really feel are valuable, because it seems clear that we can't keep going at the rate we are and the way we are, right? So not to be all doomy and gloomy, I do feel like there's more hard times ahead for a lot of people, perhaps us included. And so far I feel relatively untouched, so I'm counting my blessings and saying my gratitudes. But for a lot of people, it's been, their lives have been permanently changed already, just from how the climate is responding to a lot of the activity we've been doing over particularly the last 200 years. And so to me, I feel like there's an opportunity here to start looking at like, well, if we're gonna, you know, if we kind of get a little, if we can get somewhat identified to moving through the yearly cycle, right, and watching how we as an organism can be in harmony with the planet just on the yearly cycle with the seasons, is there a way to start looking for the more subtler cues on how to be with the planet through this, through the season of our species, so to speak, right? And how do we respond to all these systems that are in place that are not doing so well for us now, right? We kind of missed the heyday in some ways, you know, because it's time to pay the piper, and we're still developing some amazing technologies that have a lot of promise in sort of smoothing off the rough edge of this transition. But more importantly, on a day-to-day basis, how do we wake up in the morning and find a harmonic line through our day, understanding that we need to, that there's an opportunity to be making decisions, to change our mindset, to change our values and standards about how we're brought up to do things and how we've chosen to do things and our behavior around the way we do things, and to see that there's a different way to live on this planet. And it's up to us to take that step to initiate the ritual death and rebirth of how humans do life. And we're on the cutting edge. We're the pioneers. That's us. So I just want to drop this in there as just a food for thought, right? And to think about there's the big picture of your life. There's the bigger picture of our time here on this planet. And then there's the giant picture of our species on this planet. And to what degree do we want to play a part, each of us individually? And it'll probably be unknown and anonymous. It'll likely never get recorded or noticed what you did or did not do. There's so many of us, and we have such diverse micro decision-making lives that we live, right? But for yourself, within yourself, and for the people around you in your communities and the people that do know you, how can we help each other find a good way through, right? For our kids and our kids' kids, and then for your great grandkids, which is a pretty good chance you'll see them, because people aren't dying any younger. Lifespans are improving, and which means you may be around to see your great grandkids. And how do you want them to be looking at you as far as what role you played in the earth that they inherit from us, right? You've probably heard that before about that the youth, our children will inherit the earth. We don't really think too much about that because of this idea that, we get old and our kids are just right there behind us. But, when our lifespans are increasing enough to where we can actually see our great grandkids start to come up in the world, then there's more of a real sort of reconciliation with this is the earth we handed off to you 2 generations down. Hope you like it, right? That's a real thing. So there's that. And I just want to finish up by sharing some, so I guess the next question is then, so how do we even grapple with any of that? How do we take that out from just being a discussion or a thought in our head, any of this stuff, anything I've talked about today? How do we just take it from being something cool we listen to on a podcast into actually starting to bring it into our lives, embodied, physicalized into our lives, so that we can actually start to notice and experience how it might have an effect on us? Well, got a few ideas for you. So, simple stuff, right? It has to start simple. For me, like whenever I get off my exercise routine, I know I can't, if a month goes by, and whatever, life busy, you get crazy, and a month goes by and you're like, man, I haven't been to the gym. It's time to get back into it. I know for me, I can't just go jump back into the gym and do my hour, 20-minute routine the same way I was, a month ago. That's just not going to happen. One, my body's not going to be ready for it. 2, my time schedule is probably not going to be ready for it. So I start small. Let me just do like 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, and 5 minutes of stretching, like 10, like maybe even just a 10-minute workout, right? Just go through the motions. Super simple, super easy. It fits in my schedule. It doesn't cost me anything, but it starts to create this, but I experience myself like, oh, I'm working out, right? I set that time aside. I did these things with that time, and now I'm done with it. And I can look back at my day and say, I did that thing, and then it's real, right? So start small. On the actual day of equinox, which I think is the 21st, sometimes this is the 22nd, depending on where we're at in the world. You can just wake up and go watch the sunrise, right? This is the one day where the sun is going to go in parallel from due east all the way over through to due west. And it's kind of a magical moment. So get up and watch the sunrise. It doesn't have to be a big to-do. It could be on your front porch, right? And then on that same day, you got some time to schedule this. So get up early, watch the sunrise, and then make a point of going somewhere, being around somewhere, being outdoors, where you can see the sunset. And really acknowledge that what you're actually watching, we call it our sun, and it just becomes like so familiar. It's just this it's the sun. It just comes out, it's lights everything up, and then it goes away. But what you're actually watching is a star. That's a star. Like when you look up at night and all the other stars up in the sky, that the sun is exactly like one of those. It's just that we're so close to it. We're so close to a star, you guys. It's crazy. And I like to say this too. It's like when the sun's out, you can we're so close to a star, you can put your hand up and feel the heat coming off the star. That's amazing, right? So just, taking that day and making just a special moment of really trying to look at it as a star, watching a star, watching the earth. And it's not even, the sun isn't rising, the sun isn't setting, the world is spinning, right? You're turning into the star, which makes it kind of look like it's coming up. And then as we turn, we watch it go by, and then we can look over our shoulder as we continue to turn and watch it go out of sight. That's really what's happening. This planet is spinning almost at the speed of sound, believe it or not. So that's a really easy one, a pretty dramatic one, if you can kind of really get into the headset of it. Other things you can do leading up to the day, start making a gratitude list. Get a piece of paper, stick it on your fridge, stick it on your door, get a 3x5 card, put in the dashboard of your car, make a special note on your iPhone or your pad or tablet or whatever, on your laptop, and just start and call it the gratitude list. Just start noticing, what are you grateful about for the year so far? Right, up until this point, how has your year been? And what are the highlights, the things that are like, wow, beautiful, so glad this year happened. Right, just making that gratitude list. And getting prepared, starting the preparation, getting your emotional body ready to say goodbye to this year. It's not that far away. And to really, live into all that's happened in the last 200 and some days to you. So gratitude list is great. What have you accomplished? What have you celebrated? What are the highlights, things you're grateful for? You can also make a companion list. And, a big thing with New Year's is New Year's resolutions, right? And I know that it's kind of cliche, but it's really not. It's really not. So again, whether it's January 1st for you or December 21st or whenever you celebrate your new year, start now. I know if you sit down and do a little introspection, especially at a time of day like this where, the moon's out. I don't know if you can see that. But just getting a blanket and a chair and just coming outdoors somewhere quiet in the stillness of the evening, and really just start to tap into looking at what you need to say goodbye to. Ways of being, choices you make, anything about your career path, relationships, right? It might mean making requests of people to ask them if they're willing to do something differently in order for you to have a better relationship, right? So ending parts of a relationship in that way, where you're making requests and getting real getting honest and truthful and vulnerable with your friends and loved ones, and making contact through that request of like, I need this to change. Can we do it? Sometimes it can even mean letting go of a friendship, right? We all grow and change, and it's okay to not have to be around somebody that you know is not going to be healthy for you for a time to be around. It's okay. You can make that request. Start with the request. Whatever it is, it's always a request, right? So make that list. What needs to change? What needs to, preparing for that ritual death, what are you willing to let die in your life and stop being a part of, so that you can create a clearing in that field and let life compost all that for rich topsoil, rich emotional topsoil next spring. Right along with that is, start having conversations with the important people in your life. When's the last time you really sat down and told a good friend or your partner or spouse or, parents, grandparents, sibling, really sat down and said, hey, I want to talk to you for about 10 or 15 minutes. When can we do that? And tell them, hey, I love you. Here's why I love you. Here's all the ways you show up for me. Here's all the ways I see you. Really give them love. That's part of the gratitude piece too, is just sharing the abundance of what we've, again, just kind of using that, the agricultural metaphor, like the harvest is coming in now, all these bushels of beautiful fruits and vegetables are coming in. So share that abundance. We have huge hearts. We're able to witness each other and look at each other's lives. And this is how we do, how we get to be seen by others, is by actually having others say those things to us. And really making a specific time, not just a quick, hey, I love you on the phone, or, just in passing, really sitting down and saying, let me tell you exactly what I see. So that's another beautiful one. Something you can do in your own space. If you don't have an altar in your house or place where you live, or even if you do have an altar, and an altar can be something super simple. You may feel like, oh, I don't have room for an altar. Well, it doesn't have to be like a huge church thing, right? It literally can be a small plate sitting on a windowsill, or sitting on a bedstand, or sitting in a special place. And what that altar really is it's a physical reminder about what's important and what's sacred to you, what's closest to your hearts. What are you putting your faith into? What are you trusting about yourself and the world and the people around you, and finding symbolic pieces to put onto that altar. So if you don't have an altar, you can start one. Now's a great time. And a great way to do it is just to make a list of 5 things. What do you believe in? Could be science, could be God, could be the squirrel who runs across the tree outside your window every day. I don't care what it is. But find a place to, identify that you have a sense of belief, right? We all believe in something, right? And then just find something symbolic to represent that belief. And you take that little symbol, you put it on your altar, and then, you can make a commitment about every day, or when you pass it by, or however you want to do it. But make a point of going to that symbol and just saying thank you. And investing in that belief, like remembering, just bringing you remembering of like, oh yeah, I believe this is true about whatever, right? So it can be about beliefs, where your spiritual beliefs are. You can put things on there to represent hopes and dreams. You can put things on there to represent certain people that you're saying prayers for whatever reason. So an altar can be a lot of things, and they're dynamic, they're alive, right? So you can change things come and go, and maintaining an altar is a really wonderful practice. And particularly with the time when this change of season, it's a wonderful opportunity to renew your altar, to prepare it for the season that's coming, and to put a little more of a thematic awareness around that. It's the time of dying back, whatever that might look like on your altar. Spend time alone, right? Again, this is fall. It's about the introspection. It's about getting that solitude maybe you've been neglecting, that you've known you've needed over the summer, but was just too busy, having too much fun, didn't give it to yourself. Go find it now. Start taking some walks alone around the neighborhood. Go get on a trail. Take a journal. You can start doing some journal entries and just start reflecting on your year. We talked about those lists. There's all kinds of ways to find a context for yourself where you feel like you can just be present to who you are, what you're up to in the world, and just watch your emotional body in that moment. Watch your thoughts come and go, watch your feelings come and go, and just observe, like, this is me, this is my life, right? And particularly if you're able to do it outside. And again, this is such a beautiful little meadow right here. If I wasn't doing this podcast and I was here, I would definitely be posting up by one of these trees and just laying down and looking up at the darkening sky and wait for the stars to come out and just be with the trees. Just be with nature. Honestly, if I could only say one thing on this podcast, I would say just be with nature. It's really that simple. Everything else is nice paint job. But just getting out wherever you are. And again, even if you live in the deep city, there's nature somewhere. There's going to be a park nearby. Even if it's just a scraggly tree growing out of, the corner of the sidewalk that the city put in a few years ago. But just going and making contact with nature. Listening to the birds, the crickets, the changing sounds, getting near some water and listening to water or the sound of the wind in the trees, right? Smelling the change in the air as the cool weather comes and all that it brings. Touching things, right? Crinkling the dead leaves with your hands, feeling the cold water in a stream, listening, feeling how the grass sweeps across your pant leg when it's dry and brown, whatever, right? Looking for some animal tracks and just thinking, like, what was that animal up to when I saw that track? So really getting out in nature is the easiest way because, again, nature is the foundation of literally everything else we do. Everything we do is built on the foundation of nature. So it's an indispensable resource across the board. Well, that's it. Fall equinox. I hope you find a beautiful way to spend it, and I'll see you next time.